Good morning, I'm Annie Larkin, the Associate Curator of Public Programs at the Amerind Museum. Welcome to Hummingbirds and Desert Flowers, Becoming Attractions with Dr. John P. Schaefer. Before we begin the program today, I want to acknowledge that Amerind is located in southeastern Arizona on lands where the O'odham, Hopi, Oshwe, and Apache families lived for untold generations, and whose wisdom and traditions live on today in vibrant communities. We are grateful for what all these communities, rich in history, have to teach us. Thank you to our members and donors who enable Amerind to provide free online programming and fulfill Amerind's mission to promote the knowledge and understanding of the Native peoples of the Americas through research, education, conservation, and community engagement. To learn how you can assist Amerind in supporting its mission and programs by becoming a member or donor, please visit amerind.org. As a reminder, the Amerind Museum is open with safety protocols in place, such as requiring the use of masks and social distancing. To plan your trip to Amerind, please visit the visit section of our website, amerind.org. On September 18th, Amerind will host the second annual Texas Canyon Mountain Bike Race. You will be able to experience the beauty of Texas Canyon in this 15.6-mile course, which includes a section that is normally closed to the public. For more information, please visit the events section of Amerind's Facebook page or website. And on Saturday, September 25th at 11 a.m., Amerind will host the free online lecture, Traditional Ecological Knowledge, Learning from Indigenous Practices for Environmental Sustainability with Dr. Melissa K. Nelson. Again, please visit the events section of Amerind's Facebook page or website, amerind.org, for registration details. I would now like to introduce Dr. Christine Suter. Dr. Suter is the Executive Director of the Southwestern Foundation for Education and Historical Preservation, and she is also a member of Amerind's Board of Directors. Welcome, Christine.
Thanks, Annie, and welcome, John. It's my delight to be able to introduce John to all of our viewers here today. Many of you know John was the former president of the University of Arizona. He came up through the academy with degrees in chemistry from his undergrad at Polytech Institute in Brooklyn through his PhD from the University of Illinois. That began his career in teaching and research and ultimately becoming president of the University of Arizona. John, though, is more than being only a chemist and a scientist. He is truly a Renaissance person. And that started way back and early in his career, where he had an active interest in indigenous cultures, working with our beloved Bunny Fontana in Raramuri country in Mexico. That's where he honed his interest and expertise in arts and humanities through photography. He is founder of the University of Arizona Center for Creative Photography, and he was the person who brought Ansel Adams archive to all of us to enjoy here in Southern Arizona and beyond. You may have seen his photographs or may have read his books, but all focused on photography and his excellence and skills in that area. He has concentrated on the cactus and succulent flowers and has expanded to hummingbirds. With that, I hope you'll be able to visit his exhibit that's currently there at Amerind. When you walk into the gallery, it is a total immersive experience where you are just absolutely enveloped in the beauty of the flowers and of the butterflies. Or excuse me, the hummingbirds. Maybe he'll do butterflies next. But they are just absolutely stunning, stunning photography. John has been very generous to Amerind and throughout his life in various other areas, and that continues to today, where he has donated the cactus and succulent flower photography photographs to Amerind for us to sell and to support the future exhibits and programs for all of you to enjoy. And I hope you will do so and partake in this beauty and in this exhibit. And with that, I give you John Schaefer.
Thank you, Chris, and thanks to all of you for spending part of your Saturday morning with me and perhaps learning a little bit about photography and the show at Amerind. I do hope that you'll have a chance to get down there sometime and see it. It'll be open until early October, I believe. And it's sort of overwhelmed me as well. I just started printing and finally decided I had to quit because they're going to run out of wall space. I'd like to begin by talking a bit about photography. Photography is something that I think is basically misunderstood by so many people. Just having a camera doesn't make you a photographer. It's a lot more complicated than that. What is a photograph? Well, photography, as we know it today, really was invented about the 1840s. And the question is, what do we call these things that are being produced? John Herschel actually came up with the name photograph by combining two words, photo, which means light, and graph, which means something written. So something written by light is what a photograph is. Other words were heliograph, but that never caught on. Photogram, sunprint, all of those had a brief run at naming these things we were creating, but photograph is the word that stuck. I became interested in photography at a very, very young age. My parents were both immigrants. They came to this country in 1928. And the only way I ever got to know my relatives for many, many years was through photographs. The family would send pictures back and forth. I'd see these pictures, and I learned that I had a grandmother in Germany, and lots of cousins, lots of aunts and uncles. And I began to realize that this was a very good way of communicating with people like myself, who as a child couldn't read, but I could understand the pictures. And I came to realize, and more so as I got older, that photography is really a language. It's a language by which we can communicate. And as such, there are things that one really has to obey if one wants to transition from just a picture to a photograph. There are rules that you've got to follow, just like you can speak words, but you've got to put them together in a sensible kind of way to make a point. Or you can write and put letters down on a piece of paper, but that doesn't qualify you to be an author either. You've got to know more about language and recording ideas in a meaningful way to make an impression. And the same is true of photography. There are rules of composition that you need to think about before you begin. You need to think about how you're going to interpret what you're looking at. Should the image be in black and white or color or something else? How are you going to record the image with this camera of yours? On film or digital files or something else? Then you need to think about processing the data. Are you going to do it in a darkroom, in the camera itself, let the camera do it? Or are you going to do it on a computer? And how are you going to present the image? You're going to present it on a piece of paper that you frame somehow or other? Or will there be other ways of doing it? The exhibition at Amerind right now is a collection of framed paper prints, plus prints on aluminum metal surface. These are the hummingbird photographs. And I hope that you'll have a chance to take a close look at these and see what the difference is. Now, how did I get involved in flower photography? Well, about 20 years ago, I moved with my wife to the edge of the desert right near Saguaro National Park. I'd always been interested in photography in a very aggressive kind of way, taught classes in it, wrote books about it, and wanted something else to do that I could do from close to home. I began by going out into the desert nearby and photographing cactus plants and then flowers. And I always consider myself to be primarily a black and white photographer because color for most of my life was just impossible to print and make a decent print that you can hang on the wall. Color photography became more accessible in the 1970s, but all those C prints didn't have a very long lifetime. If you exposed them to any kind of light, they would quickly fade, and that wasn't very satisfactory. So black and white photography was the thing I did. Unfortunately for me, in the year 2000, I happened about a cactus farm, just right around the corner, BNB Cactus, and these plants began to bloom. And I'd never really seen colors so vivid and exciting. I decided that, well, I think I need to start doing this in color. So I'm going to put up now some color photographs that I began to take, and hopefully these will make a point. I began by photographing a few of the obvious things, some aloes, and these aloes are not Native American plants. They actually come from Africa, but they're quite delightful to look at. But what my real interest became very quickly were cactus plants. Now, cactus flowers and plants are New World species. They occur nowhere else in the world in a natural state, but in North and South America and Central America. They occur in all kinds of environments, desert environments, quite wet rainforests, etc. But they need just a little bit of water. If they live in a rainforest, they have to be able to shake off the water. Otherwise, they will rot away. There are about 3,000 species of cacti that are known. They do now occur all over the world because as soon as Columbus saw some, he took them back to Europe, to Spain, and they caught on as objects of curiosity, and people began to collect and distribute them. And there are vast collections now in Europe and elsewhere around the world. So the Americas contributed these peculiar plants to the world. I decided quickly that I was going to try to photograph all of the cactus flowers and plants in the world. I quickly realized after a while that that was an impossible task for me at my age, but I have managed to photograph over 600 different species of cacti now, and I want to share some of these with you. These are some local cacti. This is a plant from South America, and quite attractive little fairy dusters there.
Excuse me, Dr. Schaefer, I'm afraid we cannot see your shared screen.
Oh, I got to hit the share screen button.
Yes, sir.
Now can you see?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Sorry about that. This new technology is something that I'm not always abreast of. This is Cylindropuntia bigelovi, and it's something that you probably know as the teddy bear cholla, very common around Tucson, and one almost never notices the flowers, but they bloom in the spring, as do most cacti around here, and they're really quite lovely, except you don't want to mess with the plant. These are also southwestern flowers. The Trichocereus papillosis is a Texas plant. It's part of the hedgehog family, and it's quite attractive flower and quite an attractive plant. Again, another hedgehog, a local species. You have to be careful about how you handle these things. Now, you notice that in the flowers that I'm photographing, there's a black background. I started photographing these out in the desert and found that all the rocks and weeds and that kind of stuff really distracted from the images that I was trying to create. And so people ask me, how do you get the black background? Well, I started just carrying sheets of black paper around with me, black construction paper, cutting it around the cactus as necessary, and then creating a black background in that way. That essentially forces you to look at the flower itself and none of the distractions. This is an Arizona cactus. It's the Arizona flower. I'm blocking on the name at the moment, but it's one that's readily available and fun to see. Another variation of the same kind of family plant. This is a long, snaky one with beautiful white flowers. Quite a small plant. This
Dr.
is
Schaefer,
yes.
I apologize for interrupting. Would you, on your slideshow, press begin show so your images are full screen for our audience?
Begin show.
Or start slideshow?
I'm not sure.
If you go up to the top where it says slideshow.
Slideshow. I don't see.
You have home, insert, draw, design, animations, and slideshow up at the top there.
Okay. You are screen sharing. I don't see.
It's not a problem then, sir. Thank you so much. I apologize for the interruption.
Well, are you seeing pictures?
We definitely are. We definitely are.
Okay. All right. This is the common hedgehog. Sees the Triglochidiatus in the spring. It's usually all over the desert at that time of year. Echinopsis family of flowers occur in South America. They are readily hybridized, and this is a hybrid, quite beautiful. It's called Sorceress. I photographed many of these flowers at the BNB Cactus Farm, and if this is the kind of thing you're interested in, I'd say get friendly with a dealer who deals in cactus. Give them some photographs if you're really quite good at it, and ask if they would mind if you just stayed off in the corner and photographed some of their plants. Other places to go around the Tucson area are the Desert Museum, which has a nice cactus garden. Or if you're in the Phoenix area, the Desert Botanical Garden is a superb place. The Desert Botanical Garden in Phoenix has got one of the largest collections of cactus plants in the world, and it's an amazing place to visit almost any time of year. This is a cactus plant that actually grows in a wet kind of environment. It shakes off the moisture, but it needs it. It grows in trees usually and dangles out. Very large flower the size of a fist and perfumed as well, which is unusual. This is a family of plants that grows in Chile. Very attractive flowers, very ugly to play around with. If you get into this in a serious kind of way, you need to get yourself some heavy-duty leather gloves, as well as some tongs to handle these plants. These are barrel cactus flowers of one kind or another. They're out blooming in the desert now. They bloom in Tucson in August and September. Another South American plant. These almost look like rose flowers. Mammillaria are native to the Arizona environment as well as northern Mexico. These are small little plants, comfortably fit in the palm of your hand, except everybody be careful holding them. They send out dozens of flowers, just ringing the plant usually in the spring when they bloom. This is one of my favorites of the South American species. These are the prickly pears, and again, found around the Tucson area. There are several varieties. Mexican. This is Papillosis gregii, known as Queen of the Night. And this is, I think, Tucson's proudest kind of cactus plant. It blooms usually early in June, and it only blooms at night. It waits till the sun goes down, then opens up and stays open till about an hour after dawn. It is visited by a moth that pollinates it, specifically this kind of plant. And this is an unusual cactus flower. It's quite large, but it also has an exquisite smelling perfume. Most cacti do not have flowers that have odor. They rely on the color of the plant to lure the pollinators which are specific to it. This is a Tucson plant. It's a wonderful plant. And at Tohono Chul, they have a very large collection of these, and it's worthwhile going to visit on bloom night. They all seem to bloom at one time. I often get accused of phoning up the color on this particular plant. It actually is a South American plant, but it does quite well in southern Arizona and in California in particular. Beautiful bluish color, lovely plants, and very soft, furry kinds of needles, I guess. This is another Mexican plant to be found. And this is part of a large family of Trichocereus. These are hybridized by plant growers, and they have spectacularly beautiful flowers in all kinds of neon, intense kinds of colors. Worthwhile visiting a cactus farm when these are all in bloom. Okay, hummingbirds. Well, those cactus flowers are a result of about 20 years, about the year 2000 to the present time, of photographing. And with the advent of COVID, my ability to travel around and add to my collection of cactus flowers became somewhat limited. Plus the fact that I'm getting older and my wife has health problems, so I can't really stray very far from the house these days. So I began thinking about what I might do next. And it turns out that backyard is actually a continuing source of wonders for all of us. And if you live in Tucson, there are a fair number of places that attract hummers. And I thought I'd like to try to start photographing hummingbirds. And so I set up and began photographing hummingbirds. The only other place I've been able to visit, it's not too far from my home, is Madera Canyon. So some of these are from Madera Canyon, but there are 12 species of hummingbirds that make their way into Arizona, which is actually a very rich place to come and find hummingbirds. The magnificent hummingbird is a mountain hummingbird, quite large. It's about the size of a sparrow, and unlike what you'd expect a hummingbird to be, but it's spectacular in color. Hummingbirds have been photographed quite a while, and lots of people have made an effort at that. Crawford Greenwald, who's president of DuPont, began photographing these in earnest in the 1950s. And he describes the equipment that he used. He came to Arizona and went to other places all up and down South and Central America to photograph, and came up with really quite a collection of photographs. He did this with equipment that was really a little hard to lug around. It weighed about 250 pounds altogether. It required some expensive lights, automobile batteries to power them, and people to help carry the stuff around. He also photographed with film and a medium format camera, which was actually quite a challenge. Fortunately, as president of DuPont, he could afford all of this stuff. My equipment for doing this is actually about 245 pounds lighter than what he was using. And it's simply flash units plus a tripod and a camera. And I've been photographing these now for about a year and a half. It's been a great way to spend time and pass time in the time of COVID. This is the rufus hummingbird. Guess why it's named that? And it's a migratory species. It actually goes all the way up to the southern tip of Alaska when it migrates. It's coming back through Tucson right now on its way to Central America, where it chooses to winter. And these can be quite abundant in Madera Canyon at this time of year. Here are some more photographs of the rufus hummingbird perched. Quite a colorful bird, quite beautiful. Bird in flight. This is another common species. I get these in my backyard, and you can find them up in Madera Canyon as well if you go up there or around town. And Anna's hummingbird. This is a California species and a common Arizona species, especially in Tucson. It winters here and enjoys the time. Another view of Anna's hummingbird in the backyard. Anna's hummingbird perched on a twig. This is a desert hummingbird. It likes the Tucson environment, especially out near the desert edges. It's a small but very beautiful species. I showed this to a few people at one time, and they said, the problem with this is that hummingbirds don't fly at night. Well, that's true, actually, but I again encountered the problem of the background, and the background gets really confusing. What I have been most fascinated about is the configurations that hummingbirds assume when they're flying. They seem like passive little critters, but they are among the most aggressive birds I've ever encountered. This is sort of a close-up of the Cactus hummingbird, and what you see there, the slight purple, is a reflection of just a small part of the mask that the head of this bird has. The color of hummingbirds is not due to pigmentation. It's due to a refraction problem of the feathers. And when the sunlight catches it at just the right angle, you get an incredibly brilliant color, be red or purple or almost every color of the rainbow. And each species of hummingbirds has its own specific color. This is a broad-billed hummingbird. I find this is one of the most common hummingbirds in the Tucson area. It's a modest-sized hummingbird, perhaps 4 to 5 inches at most in length, bright orange bill, and brilliant colorations. Another view of the hummingbird in flight. And another. Same broad-billed hummingbird. This is the female. Notice that the female is not nearly as colorful as the male, and this is true of the entire hummingbird kingdom. The males are the ones with the glittering coats. The females are much more drab, and they're attracted to the males who are the handsomest looking. Broad-tailed hummingbird is another one that's not very common in the area, but nonetheless is not too difficult to find. Occurs in Madera Canyon, great numbers during migration time, and occurs in town if you're lucky at the right time. And that's the last rufus hummingbird that I have. So those are the kinds of things that you can find when you put your mind to it. Spend time trying to do something that no one else has done before. Photographing hummingbirds is a lot more difficult than photographing flowers. Flowers remain in place. Hummingbirds move very fast. Their wings will beat anywhere from 50 to 200 times per second. So you need to be very fast in terms of freezing their wings. You need to be very fast in terms of getting the exposure right. But it's a wonderful way to spend an afternoon or morning sitting in your yard or anywhere else with your setup photography, clicking away and hoping that something good will happen. Crawford Greenwald used film. He said he got about one decent shot out of every 30 exposures that he made. I've gotten to the point where I'm about that good, but thank goodness I'm not using film because I would have bankrupted the family in short order. With the advent of digital photography, you can take hundreds and hundreds of pictures and dump the ones that don't work out, hoping for one or two really good shots in every session. So that sort of concludes my talk, but I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have about how I do things or anything else you'd care to ask.
Thank you so much, Dr. Schaefer, for that stunning presentation. It was absolutely beautiful. And we do have questions from our audience members. The first is, do you still use black construction paper as a background?
For photographing flowers, yes, I do, because that's really the only way I can get a background. I do not use any kind of background, however, photographing hummingbirds. The key to photographing hummingbirds is to use a flash unit that has a very brief duration of a flash, something a 20,000th of a second or faster. And you can do that by having a flash unit, a good Nikon or Canon flash unit that you can set the power setting on. So you set it at a low power setting, which is a very brief but bright flash. You have to get those fairly close to your target area and trigger them 2 or 3 flash units simultaneously. What happens under those circumstances is that even in bright sunlight, the exposure is so short that the background never gets exposed unless you want it to. And you freeze the subject pretty well.
And do you use a tripod for hummingbird photography? And if so, how do you keep the bird in the field of view?
Okay, well, the important thing is to get the hummingbird to come to where you want it to be so you can photograph it. And I, as every other photographer does, is use a feeder that hummingbirds come to on a fairly regular basis to feed. I then set up my flashes and cameras in the right kind of position near the feeder. I position the camera usually about 3 or 4 feet away from the feeder, and I focus it on the area near the feeder where I think the bird will be flying into as it approaches the feeder. And then I sit and click the shutter as quickly as I can as I see a bird approaching. And you get pretty good at knowing exactly when to make an exposure, and try to set the camera so that I can take 7 or 8 exposures per second. And one gets the bird in the frame on a fairly regular basis. I use a macro lens, not a telephoto lens, a macro lens, which is on a tripod, which enables me to get incredibly good detail up close. I can make a 16 by 20 print of a hummingbird where you can see every single feather in great detail using a macro lens. I have used a telephoto lens to photograph birds, hummingbirds, but it's not very satisfactory. If they're perching on a limb, it's a piece of cake to use a telephoto lens. But unfortunately for me, at Madera Canyon, they do not allow you to use flash, and you can't really photograph hummingbirds in motion unless you have a flash unit set up with your camera. So you need to get them perching at a place like Madera Canyon.
And what kind of camera do you use?
Let's see, my wife isn't listening, so I have been using a Nikon D850, a digital camera, for most of these. I have now gone to a mirrorless camera, which I really haven't tried out yet, but it looks very promising. For the cactus flower photographs that I used a Pentax 645. This is a medium format camera with film. All of my cactus flower photographs are really taken on film, but the hummingbirds are our digital cameras.
And our next question is from a fellow photographer who enjoys taking photos of hummingbirds. Any ideas on how to keep hummingbirds from being so territorial? She sees pictures online of multiple hummingbirds in one place, but she has no luck with more than one at a time.
Well, neither do I. I said earlier on, hummingbirds are incredibly aggressive, and they'll take ownership of a feeder. And I have found that, for example, the dominant ones around my house are the Anna's hummingbird and the broad-billed hummingbird. The Cactus hummingbird sort of sneaks in when the others aren't looking, but it'll get chased off in a heck of a hurry. The solution I've come up with is to hang a heck of a lot of feeders in the yard. So I've got 4 feeders spaced apart, and each hummingbird seems to take possession of one particular feeder. So that seems to work out fairly well for me. These feeders also have about 5 or 6 plastic flowers. What I do is when I'm getting ready to photograph is I put a piece of tape over 5 of the holes so that the hummingbird is forced to come to the one feeder hole that I can focus on.
And another equipment question, you had mentioned that you use a macro lens, and one of our audience members is curious in what type of macro lens you use.
I have a dedicated macro lens. I use a 105 millimeter Nikon lens, which enables me to get up very close. But if you get up too close, you lose depth of field, and if you photograph wide open, you don't have depth of field. So I usually wind up setting the macro lens at f22 to f32, something in that range, so I get maximum depth of field at about 4 feet distance.
And how do you achieve the black background in your hummingbird images?
Again, this is a natural consequence of using a very bright flash, very short duration exposure, so that even in bright sunlight, the background doesn't get exposed. If you just set up the camera in that way, you're going to get a background that just doesn't show up, or it's very, very dark. And you can wash it out then with Photoshop or something like that. You could probably also put up a piece of black paper in the background. I tried experimenting with different kinds of backgrounds. I went to a fabric store and got some blue fabric and black fabric and all that kind of stuff. That works as well.
Do you usually look for front lighting in photographing flowers?
Actually, none of my flower pictures are taken with flash. A lot of the greenhouse photographs of the plants in bloom are just a wonderful enveloping light. So I just, again, position the camera about 4 or 5 feet above the plant. I put the plant on a barrel or something like that, or a little stool, just a couple of feet off the ground, and photograph straight down for the most part. A lot of the photographs are also taken out in full sunlight, and again, use the macro lens and go for depth of field and sharpness.
What is the name of the Cactus Farm in addition to the BNB farm?
Okay, there are lots of cactus farms around town, but one of the really fine ones is the BNB Cactus Farm, which is out at the end of Speedway. Speedway, and about Freeman Road, just before you get to Freeman Road. It's open every day except Sunday and Monday, and it's got an incredibly large collection of plants. All summer long is a good time to go. Spring is when the most glorious blooms are evidencing themselves, but certainly any time of year, right now is a good time to go. A lot of interesting barrel cacti in bloom. There's always something there of interest.
And is the Reforest hummer particularly aggressive?
The what hummer?
Is it Reforest?
Rufus.
Rufus, sorry.
Yeah, they're small hummingbirds, but they're all bullies. I mean, if you go up the Madeira Canyon right now, for example, they have a dozen feeders up, or half a dozen, and you'll see one hummingbird just buzzing another one the moment they hit a spot they don't like. Yeah, they're very aggressive little birds. There are about 300 species of hummingbirds, and we have 12, as I said, in Tucson. East of the Mississippi, they only have one, the ruby-throated hummingbird, but we have 12 here. If you start going south, the numbers increase incredibly fast. And by the time you get to Ecuador and Venezuela, Colombia, places like that, there are hundreds of species. Costa Rica is also a very hummingbird-friendly place that is also a fairly safe place for Americans to travel these days. And they're all set up to do wildlife photography. A lot of people go there to photograph hummingbirds. I'd like to be able to do that sometime too.
I think we have time for a couple of more questions. The next question is in regard to Madeira Canyon. Do flashes disturb the birds? Why don't they allow the use of flash?
I don't know. There's a sign up there that says no flash photography. My experience is that the flash doesn't really seem to bother the birds, and may bother people who are there looking at birds and wishing you weren't using your flash. I don't know. But that certainly is a limitation. There are other places in Madera Canyon that accommodate visitors. I haven't explored those possibilities. There are also places like Ramsey Canyon, which is a rich environment for birds, for hummingbirds. Over in the Chiricahuas, Bisbee, places like that are also fine. The Patton Center, which is down in Patagonia, is also a wonderful hummingbird facility. They've been closed due to COVID, unfortunately, for much of the year, and I don't know what their attitude is towards allowing people to use flashes down there. And I may be wrong about them having a disturbing effect on hummingbirds. If you go read Crawford Greenwald's book, you'd probably be horrified about what they had to do there. His hummingbirds were captured. What he had was an ornithologist with a fishing rod, fly fishing rod, who would have a sticky substance, and when the bird lit on the flower, they used the rod to stick it to the back of the bird and reel it in. They would then use lighter fluid to clean off the back of the bird and slip the bird in through a piece of cheesecloth so the head stuck out, and would hold it in his pocket or whatever, and then put the bird in a cage and feed the bird in a cage for a week till it got used to that environment. And then Greenwald would begin photographing the bird in a large cage kind of environment. That would definitely be a no-no these days.
And our last question, what has brought you the most pleasure in this nature photography?
One of the big influences in my life was growing up in New York City, but becoming a member of a Boy Scout troop. I went from Cub Scouts to Boy Scouts, becoming a Scout Master, and I did merit badges like bird watching. Bird watching was something that I got hooked on as a young teenager, and I've stayed with it all of my life. I went to graduate school at the University of Illinois, and in Champaign-Urbana, I don't know if you've ever been there, but there is absolutely nothing to do of socially interesting kinds of things. But it's a great place for bird watching. It's on a flyway. And so I really got aggressive about bird watching when I was in graduate school, and I've just kept it up ever since then. I got involved in conservation work as a result of that, got involved in getting the Nature Conservancy set up in Arizona in the early 1960s. I got Tucson Audubon Society to organize and become part of National Audubon Society again in the 1960s. And it's just been part of my life that I take great pleasure in. And the outdoors are just wonderful. Every kind of environment in the country is different. Deserts wonderful, so are the forests of Alaska. And I think it's just a never-ending source of pleasure.
Well, we feel very lucky that we were able to view all of your photographs today of your beautiful flowers as well as hummingbirds. It was a spectacular presentation. Thank you so much for your time today, Dr.
One other comment.
Yes, sir.
All of the hummingbird pictures I showed you today, I don't think any of those are at Amerind. The ones at Amerind are far better. And the same with the flowers. There are many, many more flowers than I showed you today. So do make an effort to get down there. It's worth your while.
I definitely agree. Dr. Schaefer's exhibit will be on display at Amerind through October 31st. I encourage everyone to make the trip down to Dragoon to experience his lovely exhibit. In addition to saying thank you to Dr. Schaefer, I'd also like to thank Dr. Christine Suter for joining us earlier in the program. Thank you to our audience as well. And we hope that you will join us again on September 25th for our next online program. Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Dr. Schaefer. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.